Maria stepped out of the courtroom into the warm afternoon light, her heart still racing from the verdict. She held Sophia's hand tightly, and together they walked down the stone steps. The city felt different now, quieter and hopeful. Neighbors and supporters waited at the bottom of the stairs, their smiles bright. Now some carried homemade signs that read, "Justice for Maria and Sophia, and protect every family." Maria paused to thank each person, her voice gentle but firm. "You," she said again and again, bowing her head to show her gratitude. Sophia stood beside her, clutching her grandmother's hand and her doll, her eyes wide with wonder at how many people had come to share their victory. They were surrounded by reporters, but Ms. Patel guided them through the crowd, toward a small van waiting at the curb. Van's door opened, and inside were water bottles, snacks, and folders with information about new safety protocols being introduced at the police department. Maria gasped softly when she saw a bright flyer that announced, "Child and medical emergency response training for every officer." The flyer explained that from now on, any call involving an injured person, especially a child, would trigger a special response team trained to offer help quickly and safely. As they drove away from the courthouse, Sophia leaned against the window and watched the city go by. Maria felt a deep sense of relief settle in her chest. For weeks she had carried fear and anger, tightening her chest like a vice. Now she felt those feelings loosen and float away, replaced by hope and determination. Beside her, Ms. Patel spoke quietly of what came next, a press conference to announce the new training program, meetings with city leaders to keep the pressure on, and plans to share their story with other families who might face similar danger. That evening, Maria and Sophia returned home to a small celebration hosted by their community group. The living room was decorated with balloons and banners, and neighbors had brought homemade dishes and desserts. The air smelled of fresh flowers and sweet cakes. Music played softly on a borrowed speaker, and the room buzzed with laughter and chatter. Maria felt shy at first, unused to being the center of attention. But when she saw Sophia dancing with her doll in one hand and a slice of cake in the other, she couldn't help but smile. An older woman tapped a spoon against a glass to get everyone's attention. "Let us thank Maria and Sophia," she said, her voice warm. "They showed us that one voice can make a difference, but many voices can change the world." The room erupted into applause. Sophia climbed onto a chair and waved her doll like a flag. Maria felt tears sting her eyes again, but these tears were different. They were tears of joy and pride. She stepped forward, her bare feet sinking into the soft carpet, and hugged Sophia. Together, they faced their friends and neighbors, hearts full. After the applause died down, neighbors began to share their own experiences and fears. A young mother talked about a time when her child had fallen in the park and no one stopped to help. A father spoke of a night when his elderly father, confused by medicine, wandered into traffic and officers treated him like a suspect instead of a lost man. Each story added weight to their cause. Maria listened, her resolve strengthening. She realized that their fight was not just about one incident. It was about changing a culture that sometimes saw fear before it saw need. In the days that followed, Maria and Ms. Patel spoke at city council meetings, urging leaders to fund the new training program. They met with the police chief, who promised to implement the changes within 60 days. The chief even asked Maria to visit the training academy to share her experience with recruits. Maria felt nervous at the thought of standing in front of young officers, but she agreed. She wanted them to see her not as a plaintiff in a lawsuit, but as a grandmother whose only crime had been love. On the morning she visited the academy, Maria wore a simple blouse and cardigan. Sophia stayed with a trusted neighbor, excited to tell her grandmother all about her day afterward. Maria sat in a circle of bright-eyed cadets, each in uniform and eager to listen. She began by showing them the video from that afternoon at the convenience store. The cameras were off. This was a private session. As the scene filled the screen, officers stiffened in their seats. Maria spoke of her fear and shame, of how she had thought the people sworn to protect them were a greater danger than the broken glass. She described Sophie's tears, the sharp pain in her arm and the shaking of her own hands. Her words were simple, honest, and full of feeling. When she finished, the room was silent. Then one young cadet raised his hand. "Ma'am," he said, voice unsteady, "I'm so sorry that happened to you and your granddaughter. I promise to remember this lesson." Other cadets nodded, their faces sober. The instructor thanked Maria for her courage and said her story would become part of the academy's official curriculum. Maria stood and shook hands, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. She thought of how fear had turned to understanding in that room. She had changed hearts, one by one. That night, back at home, Maria cuddled Sophia and tucked her into bed. The little girl yawned and whispered, "Grandma, I'm glad we did it." Maria kissed her forehead and replied, "So am I, my love." She turned off the light and sat on the edge of the bed. Above Sophia's head was a drawing the girl had made, 2 figures holding hands. Guns crossed out in red, and the words "No More Fear" written in bright crayon. Maria traced the letters with her fingertips, smiling through tears. Later, Maria opened her journal and wrote a final entry for this chapter of their lives. She described the faces of their neighbors, the applause in the living room, the promise in the recruits' eyes. She wrote of the flyers and banners, the city council's nod, and the promise of real change. She wrote of hope, the word shining. On the page, like a beacon, she closed the journal and lay back, breathing in the quiet night. She knew there would be more fights ahead, bigger cases, harder challenges, but she also knew she and Sophia were not alone. They had community, truth, and courage on their side. As sleep overcame her, Maria whispered a wish into the darkness. May no other grandmother ever have to watch her grandchild bleed alone. May fear never cloud a good officer's judgment, and may families everywhere have the safety they deserve. With that hope in her heart, she finally closed her eyes, ready to rest and ready to face tomorrow. ChatGPT said Maria woke early on the day of the trial. Light filtered through her curtains, soft and pale. She sat on the edge of her bed, heart thumping in her chest. Today she would stand in a courtroom and tell her story. Sophia pressed a stuffed bunny toward her cheek and climbed into bed beside her grandmother. "Are you ready?" Maria asked, brushing a strand of hair from Sophia's forehead. "I am," Sophia said, voice small but firm. Maria hugged her tight and felt a wave of courage. Washed through her, they dressed in their best clothes. Maria wore a simple blue dress and a light cardigan. Sophia chose a white blouse and navy skirt, her bandage hidden under her sleeve. Ms. Patel arrived just before they left, carrying a folder heavy with paperwork. She smiled at them both. "You two look wonderful," she said. The courthouse loomed tall on the corner of Main and 3rd. Its stone steps rose like a challenge. Maria's palms grew slick as they climbed them. Reporters stood near the entrance, their cameras ready. Few neighbors who had supported her waved quietly. Maria gave them small nods. She held Sophia's hand tightly, with Ms. Patel guiding. They entered through tall wooden doors into a foyer of marble floors and high ceilings. Security guards checked their bags. The metal detector beeped as Sophia walked through, but the guard smiled and waved her on. Maria's heart lifted at the kindness. They followed signs to courtroom to be. Inside, the room smelled of old wood and paper. Rows of benches faced a raised platform where the judge would sit. A long table on each side held attorneys. On one side sat Ms. Patel and Maria. On the other side sat 2 police attorneys. Across from them, the visitors' benches filled with neighbors, community members, and a few strangers curious about the case. Sophia climbed onto a chair beside her grandmother and arranged her doll on her lap. The judge, a calm woman in her 60s with silver hair, entered the room. Everyone rose. She took her seat and nodded. "Please be seated," she said. Her voice carried authority but no anger. Maria sat, her legs crossed at the ankle. Felt a soft pressure from the bench beneath her. The bailiff called the case. Lopez versus City Police Department. The judge looked at Maria. "Are we ready to proceed?" Ms. Patel stood and answered clearly, "Yes, Your Honor." The judge nodded and turned to the jury. She asked if each juror could decide fairly based on evidence and law. Each juror said I can. The judge rested her hands on the bench. Then let us begin. The prosecutor opened by playing the video recorded by the bystander. As the screen lit up, Maria felt her chest tighten. She saw herself kneel beside Sophia when the glass broke. She saw the blood on the napkin. Then she saw the officers rush in. Their guns appeared in slow motion, cold and dark. Sophia's small body froze. Maria pressed napkins harder to her granddaughter's arm. The courtroom fell silent. Maria closed her eyes for a moment and remembered the shock of seeing the guns aimed at them. Yet here in this room, the truth shone clear. When the video ended, Miss Patel stood. She faced the jury and spoke in a steady voice. This video shows the moment when two police officers pointed their weapons at a wounded child and her grandmother. There was no threat. There was only fear and confusion. We will show you how training, or lack of it, led to a near tragedy. Maria felt each word settle in her heart. She watched the faces of the jurors. Some frowned at the screen. Others glanced at their notes. Next, Ms. Patel called Officer Daniels to the stand. He wore his uniform but sat stiff and tall. The bailiff swore him in, and he raised his right hand. "State your name and rank," Ms. Patel asked. "Officer Mark Daniels, City Police Department, Patrol Officer," he replied. She asked him to describe what he saw that afternoon. He spoke of a call about a suspected robbery and of walking into a tense scene. He said he thought the woman and child might be attacking the store clerk. His voice was firm. Ms. Patel nodded. "You saw a child bleeding. Did you hear any threat from either person?" Officer Daniels shook his head.
"No."
"I heard nothing." "Then why did you draw your weapon?" she asked. He stammered. I was scared. I thought I might be in danger." Ms. Patel leaned forward. "You thought the bleeding child could harm you? You saw no weapon. You saw no aggression. That correct?" He swallowed and said yes. His answer hung in the air like a stone. The jury consulted their notes, and Maria felt the tension rise in the room. The officer's admission that fear alone led him to point his gun at a child, and her grandmother weighed heavily in the air. Miss Patel turned Officer Daniels to the bailiff and called the next witness. A nurse from the hospital took the stand. She described Sophia's injury: a deep cut, 3 stitches, a nerve close to the surface. Her voice was calm but firm. She explained how the child could have lost much more than blood if help had arrived. Even seconds later, Maria felt tears come to her eyes, but let them stay behind her lashes. She squeezed Sophia's hand and remembered the sharp sting of panic as her granddaughter whimpered. After the nurse, Miss Patel called Maria herself. Bailiff swore her in, and she raised her hand. Her voice trembled at first. "State your name," Miss Patel asked. "Maria Lopez," she said. "Tell us what happened that afternoon." Maria took a breath. She saw the jurors leaning forward. She saw the police attorneys watching her. She felt Sophia's eyes, wide and trusting. She felt Ms. Patel's calm presence by her side. Maria spoke of the bright afternoon, of Sophia's laughter, of the crack of glass and the flash of red on her granddaughter's sleeve. She described finding napkins, pressing them to stop the bleeding, and calling for help. Then she spoke of the officers rushing in, guns drawn, shouting orders she could not understand through panic. She told the court how she felt her heart pound, how Sophia's tears fell, how she tried to protect her with her body. With each word, her voice grew stronger. When she finished, there was a hush. The judge cleared her throat and nodded. "Thank you, Miss Lopez." The police attorney cross-examined her, asking if she had feared for their safety or if she had threatened the officers. Maria answered simply, "No." The attorney's questions felt sharp, but Maria remained calm. She looked at him and said, "I only wanted to help my granddaughter." After both sides rested their cases, the judge gave closing instructions. She reminded the jury to base their decision on facts and law, not emotion. She explained the standard for excessive force. The lawyers made brief closing remarks. Ms. Patel spoke of duty and care, of the right to feel safe with those sworn to protect. The police attorney spoke of split-second decisions and the difficulty of the job. Finally, the judge dismissed the jury to deliberate. Maria and Sophia sat quietly, their hands entwined. Miss Patel patted Maria's shoulder. "Oh." "We wait." Outside the courtroom, neighbors gave them thumbs up and quiet smiles. Maria felt a flicker of hope. Hours passed. Sophia rested her head on Maria's lap while they waited in a small room. Maria stroked her hair and tried not to think of every possible outcome. Every minute felt heavy. Then footsteps echoed in the hallway. The door opened and the bailiff called the jury back in. Maria's heart pounded. She stood and guided Sophia to her seat beside her. The jury filed into the room. Each juror took a seat in front of the judge. The judge asked if they had reached a verdict. The jury foreperson nodded. "Yes, Your Honor." The judge invited the foreperson to speak.
The foreperson cleared his
throat. Maria leaned forward. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," the foreperson said. A rush of relief and emotion flooded Maria. She blinked back tears. Sophia covered her mouth in surprise. Ms. Patel smiled and whispered, "You did it." The judge thanked the jury and dismissed them. Maria hugged Sophia and then Ms. Patel. As they left the courtroom, cameras clicked and neighbors cheered softly. Maria felt light and strong at the same time. Today, justice was served. Yet she knew the work would continue to keep every family safe. With her granddaughter by her side and her community behind her, she felt ready for whatever came next. Maria woke the next morning feeling the weight of the coming days settle on her chest. Rays of sunlight slipped through the curtains, but the warmth did not reach her heart. She dressed slowly, pulling on a soft sweater and careful shoes. Sophia waited at the kitchen table, her small arm wrapped in fresh bandages that Maria had changed herself. The little girl offered a gentle smile, and Maria returned it, though her thoughts were far away. Today, Miss Patel would come back to help them prepare the lawsuit. Maria made tea in the old kettle and arranged simple sandwiches on a plate. She placed them on the table beside a neat stack of papers. Each form represented a step forward. Witness statements, medical bills, legal filings. Her hands trembled slightly as she organized them. She wanted everything in perfect order. When the doorbell rang, Maria took a deep breath and opened the door. Ms. Patel stood there in a dark suit, carrying her black bag and a calm, assured look. Behind her stood two young volunteers from the community. Group 1 held a recorder, and the other carried a stack of printed witness statements. Maria welcomed them inside, guiding them to the living room table where the papers waited. Sophia sat beside her grandmother, clutching her doll but watching every move with growing curiosity. Ms. Patel greeted Sophia warmly, kneeling to speak on her level. "Hello, Sophia, ready to help Grandma today?" Sophia nodded, proud to be part of the effort. Maria felt a rush of hope. Her granddaughter's small help made a big difference in her heart. They began by reviewing each statement. The videotaped footage was key. The volunteer pressed play on her phone, and the room filled with the low hum of recorded voices. Maria watched herself kneel beside Sophia as officers pointed their guns. Her pulse quickened when she saw the glint of metal and the sharp fear in her granddaughter's eyes. Yet each time she eyed the screen, she felt the power of truth supporting her. Ms. Patel stopped the video and looked at Maria. "This will speak for itself in court, and we need your own statement." She handed Maria a blank page and a pen. Maria drew in a shaky breath. She tried to find the right words. She wrote of the afternoon light, the crack of glass. The instant the world turned quiet as blood seeped through Sophia's sleeve. She described her panic, her desperate search for something clean, her fear when guns replaced sirens. She wrote as simply as she could, letting her memory guide her hand. When she finished, Ms. Patel read it aloud. Each word sounded true and strong. "This is exactly what we need," the lawyer said. She folded the statement and placed it with the other documents. The volunteers scanned it into their phones, making digital copies for the court file. Maria watched them work and felt a steady, calm grow inside her. Next, they planned their visit to the police department. Ms. Patel explained how to file the formal complaint. She would accompany Maria to the department's front desk, where they would present the evidence and sign the necessary forms. The department would have 30 days to respond, talk through every detail, from parking at a safe distance to greeting the desk officer politely. Maria practiced her calm greeting. "Good morning. I'm here to file a formal complaint regarding an incident on Main Street." Saying it out loud helped her believe she could do it. After lunch, Maria and Ms. Patel set out for the police station. They walked slowly, Sophia coming along and holding Maria's free hand. The department building stood tall and gray at the end of the block. Maria's heart pounded as they climbed the steps. A young desk officer looked up as they entered and swallowed hard at the sight of Ms. Patel's calm confidence and the neat folder in Maria's hands. Ms. Patel spoke first. "Good afternoon. We're here to file a complaint on behalf of Maria Lopez and her granddaughter Sophia regarding the excessive use of force during a medical emergency on July 20th. She placed the folder on the counter. The desk officer opened it and scanned the first pages. Maria stood beside her granddaughter, her back straight, her heart steady. The officer nodded and asked Maria to sign a few forms. At each sheet, Maria wrote her name clearly. She felt a strange pride in those signatures. They were proof that she refused to be silenced. When the paperwork was complete, the officer thanked them and said their complaint would be forwarded to Internal Affairs. Maria and Sophia left the station feeling a lightness they had not felt since the incident. Even though the path ahead was long, the first step was done. That evening at home, volunteers arrived with a welcome surprise. A homemade binder decorated with colorful stickers and labeled Maria and Sophia versus Police Dept. They had bound copies of each document and printed photographs from the video. Maria laughed softly at the playful binder, and Sophia clapped her hands. Together they placed the binder on the bookshelf like a trophy. It was a symbol of their fight and their courage. Over the next days, they prepared for depositions. Ms. Patel taught Maria how to speak clearly under oath. She practiced asking and answering simple questions. What happened next? Did you feel? Can you describe what you saw? Maria repeated her answers until each one sounded natural. When she stumbled over words, Ms. Patel gently guided her back on track. Bit by bit, Maria's confidence grew. Sophia started calling Ms. Patel, Auntie Lawyer, and she often sat on the floor, flipping through the pages of the big binder. Maria watched her and felt warmth spread through her chest. In her granddaughter's curiosity, she saw hope for the future world where truth mattered and everyone could feel safe. On the morning of the depositions, sunlight poured through the windows of the small conference room where they met the police attorney. Maria and Ms. Patel sat across from two officers in uniform. The room felt tense, but Maria squared her shoulders and looked at the man next. To her, he squeezed her hand under the table. She nodded and took a steadying breath. The questions began, and Maria answered each one clearly. She described the thirst for water and the sudden cut, the panicked search for napkins, the fear when guns appeared. She spoke of Sophia's tears and the shame of the officer's misunderstanding. Each time she spoke, her voice grew firmer. When she finished, the police attorney nodded and set down his pen. "Thank you, Ms. Lopez." They left the room and walked out into the bright afternoon. Maria felt exhausted, but a joyful kind of exhaustion, like the day finally made sense. Sophia skipped by her side, humming a small tune. Ms. Patel closed her notebook with a satisfied smile. "You did wonderfully," she said. That night, Maria sat at her kitchen table and reached for a pen. She began to write in her journal, a habit she had taken up during these days. She wrote of the kindness of strangers, the power of truth, the strength she found within herself. She made special notes of how Sophia smiled each morning and offered help with papers. Her words flowed freely, a record of a time when fear tried to take over, but love and courage would not let it. As bedtime approached, Maria tucked Sophia into bed. The little girl hugged her grandmother tight. "I'm proud of us," she whispered. Maria kissed Sophia's forehead. "I'm proud of you," she answered. Alone in the quiet house, Maria closed her journal and turned off the light. She lay in bed, feeling the night air cool against her skin. She thought of tomorrow and the day after, when the case would move forward in court. She knew the fight was not over, but she no longer felt afraid. With evidence gathered, statements recorded, and a community by her side, she had the strength to face whatever came next. And so, as she drifted to sleep, Maria carried a calm certainty. In her heart, no matter how heavy the world tried to be, she and Sophia would stand together, their voices strong and clear, until justice was done. Maria woke before dawn, her mind racing with the memory of the day before. She lay very still in the darkness, listening to Sophia's soft breathing in the next room. The little girl had fallen asleep clutching her favorite doll, but Maria knew. The fear still lingered in her granddaughter's dreams. After a long, shaky breath, she rose quietly and tiptoed to the kitchen. The cold tile under her bare feet felt harsh, but it helped wake her. She set a kettle on the stove and wrapped her hands around a mug, letting the warmth settle in her chest. Outside, the first pale light of morning crept through the curtains. Maria stared at it for a moment, thinking how something as simple as sunlight could feel both comforting and strange after yesterday's terror. By sunrise, Sophia joined her at the small kitchen table. Her arm was bandaged neatly, and though the cut had stopped bleeding, the memory of pain made her draw closer to her grandmother. Maria poured warm milk into a bowl of cereal and sat across from her, trying to smile. "Good morning, sweetheart," she said softly. Sophia nodded, her eyes still wide with sleep, and something else in Maria recognized all too well. The two ate in silence, broken only by the soft tick of the clock on the wall. Each second felt heavy, like a drum counting out the long wait for normal life to return. Word of the shooting spread that morning like wildfire. A neighbor knocked on the door, holding her phone. "They showed the video on the local news," she said, voice low. Maria took the phone and watched herself kneel beside Sophia as the officers pointed guns. Her heart pounded. The image of that cold metal, aimed at a bleeding child and her grandmother, felt like a punch in the stomach all over again. The neighbor left quickly, embarrassed, and Maria put the phone down. She wanted the world to forget, but she knew too many people had already seen. Reporters started calling, and strangers knocked on her door, offering help. That afternoon, a woman named Ms. Patel arrived with a gentle knock. She introduced herself as a civil rights lawyer who had seen the video online. Her black bag held papers and a calm confidence. Maria felt both relief and worry. Could she trust this stranger? Ms. Patel sat at the table, glanced at Sophia's bandage, and offered a kind smile. "I'm here to help," she said simply. Maria nodded slowly. Ms. Patel laid out steps they could take: collect witness statements, file a complaint with the police department, and prepare a civil suit for damages. She spoke in clear, simple words, giving Maria room to ask questions. For the first time that day, Maria felt a spark of hope. Over the next hours, they gathered evidence. A friend who had filmed the incident came by to copy the video. Another neighbor, who saw the officers rush in, signed a short statement describing what she saw and heard. Maria dug out her medical bill and the hospital's report on Sophia's wound. Each paper felt heavy in her hands. Ms. Patel organized them into neat piles. She explained that detail mattered. Every dropped napkin, every shouted order could show the officers were wrong. Maria worked alongside her, feeling her own anger and fear turn into focus. She pressed stamps and slipped forms into envelopes, determined to make every moment count. Meanwhile, the police department issued a brief statement. It said they were reviewing the incident but gave few details. It noted that officers had felt threatened, though it did not explain why a grandmother and her hurt granddaughter would pose any threat. Two of the officers involved were placed on administrative leave, a move that upset some in the community who thought it was too little, too late. People on social media demanded firmer action. Maria read the angry comments, some sympathetic, others hurtful. She closed the browser window, wishing she didn't have to watch the pain of so many strangers before she could heal her own. That evening, a small group of neighbors came together in Maria's living room. They brought snacks and warm words. One held Sophia gently, while another made tea for Maria. They talked about what had happened, their voices low but firm. A retired teacher explained how she would speak at the city council meeting. A young activist offered to organize a petition. Maria listened, overwhelmed by their kindness. Tears slipped down her cheeks, and she let them fall. She realized she was not alone. Even if the whole police force seemed against her, her neighbors were by her side, ready to stand up for what was right. Sophia watched from the couch, clutching her doll. When she saw her grandmother cry, she slipped off the pillows and crawled into Maria's lap. Maria hugged her, feeling the little girl's heart beat against her own. "It's going to be okay," she whispered, knowing that part of her own fear would not ease until justice was done. Sophia nodded, her eyes solemn for someone so young. They sat together in the warm light of lamps, family photos on the walls glowing softly behind them. That night, Maria lay awake again, but this time her mind was busy with plans, she thought. Of the paperwork she had signed, the names she would call, the steps she would take in court. She remembered Ms. Patel's words, "You have the right to be safe. You will be heard." The anger and the fear mixed into a fierce resolve. She would not let the officer's actions go unchallenged. She would fight, not just for herself and Sophia, but for every family who might face the same terror. Before drifting off, she held a small folded note in her hand, the witness statements. The video copy, her granddaughter's medical report. They were pieces of a story that was not yet finished. As she closed her eyes, Maria felt a quiet courage settle in her heart. A promise that this day of fear would become the start of something stronger. Something that could change the world just a little bit for the better. Maria and Sophia walked down the quiet street hand in hand, their steps light under a bright afternoon sun. Maria, a gentlewoman in her late 60s, had brought her granddaughter to the little corner store to pick up a bottle of cold water and a small treat. Sophia, 8 years old and full of energy, chattered about her school day. She told her grandmother how she had learned to write a new word in English class and how excited she was to try it at home. Maria smiled and encouraged her, tucking stray wisps of silver hair behind her ears as they neared the glass door of the store. The breeze carried the faint sound of traffic from the road ahead. Mixed with the soft hum of the store's old refrigerator units, Maria could feel Sophia's small hand warm in hers, and she thought how lucky she was to have these moments of simple joy. She glanced down at her granddaughter's bright eyes and shy smile, imagining the stories the little girl would tell her own children one day. Maria loved these still, calm walks, before the world seemed to rush in with all its noise and worry, as they reached for the door handle. Sophia gave it a gentle push. The glass on the door had a crack running through it, jagged and thin, but neither of them thought much of it. The next moment, a loud snap rang out as the weakened glass gave way. Shards fell like rain, and one pointed shard sliced across Sophia's forearm. Sophia gasped, her eyes wide as bright red droplets stained her pale sleeve.
Owie, Maria's heart froze.
She dropped to her knees in an instant, pulling Sophia close and pressing her own clean hand over the child's arm to stop the bleeding. Maria's breath came fast and loud in her chest as she searched her purse for anything clean. She grabbed a few napkins from the counter and folded them, pressing them firmly against Sophia's wound. Sophia's small fingers curled around the napkins, her face scrunched in pain. "It hurts, Grandma," she whispered, her voice quivering. Maria held Sophia's hand tight, whispering back in soft words she hoped would calm the hurt. "I know, my love. I know. We'll get help in just a moment." She kept her voice steady, even as her own mind raced with fear. Inside the store, other customers froze in place, staring at the broken glass and the sight of blood. A teenage boy who had been reaching for a soda dropped his bottle, and it clattered on the floor. The store clerk stepped back behind the counter, phone already in hand, fingers trembling as he dialed for an ambulance. Maria could hear the crackle of the store's old intercom as the clerk called out for someone to find a first aid kit. The air felt heavy and strange, as if the happiness of the afternoon had been sucked away. Outside, the wind rustled the leaves of a nearby tree, carrying with it the hurried footsteps of people running toward the store. Maria looked up to see several strangers hovering at the doorway, concern etched on their faces. A woman with long brown hair knelt beside her, offering a hand. "Let me help," she said gently, taking some napkins and adding them to the pile. On Sophia's arm, Maria nodded, relief mingling with her worry. She focused on keeping pressure on the wound, watching Sophia's eyes flutter as she fought the pain. In that moment, the distant wail of sirens grew louder. Maria's heart skipped a beat, expecting to see the flashing lights of an ambulance. Instead, 2 police cars tore around the corner and screeched to a halt in front of the store. The engines cut off with a sudden silence that felt even louder than the sirens. Within seconds, 4 officers poured out of the cars, yelled orders in a rough, harsh tone, their voices echoing through the small lot. "Hands where I can see them. Don't move." Before anyone could react, the officers aimed their handguns at Maria and Sophia. The metal glinted in the sun, cold and frightening. Maria froze, eyes wide as she realized what was happening. She kept her hand on Sophia's arm, trying to protect her, but the gesture only seemed to alarm the officers more. "Step back," one of them barked, voice tight. His finger hovered on the trigger. Maria's stomach dropped as she saw tears fill Sophia's eyes. A hush fell over the scene. The bystanders who had hurried to help froze in mid-gesture, their faces full of shock. A man in a red shirt raised his phone, his hands shaking as he filmed the moment. The teenager who had dropped his soda leaned against the wall, staring in terror. Maria felt a hot wave of shame and disbelief wash over her. She mouthed the words, "It's okay," to her granddaughter, though nothing felt okay. One of the officers stepped forward, his voice softer but still firm. "Ma'am, I need you to back away." Maria shook her head, her voice caught in her throat. "Please," she croaked, "my granddaughter is hurt." She cut her arm. She lifted her free hand, showing a small blood-soaked napkin. The officer's eyes flicked to the red stain, but he kept his gun trained on them. "Show me your hands," he repeated. Maria's pulse pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Sophia whimpered, her small body trembling. Maria hugged her closer, covering her arm with her own body as best as she could. The teenager filming took a step forward, raising his phone higher. "Look," he shouted. "She's bleeding. It's just a cut." At once, Maria felt a shift in the air. The officers exchanged glances. Another bystander, an older man with glasses, raised his hands and spoke up. "She's protecting the child, officer. You can see the blood. She's not holding a weapon." Slowly, the officer in front lowered his gun, though he kept it close to his chest. The other 3 officers followed his lead, their guns lowering to hip level.
Oh.
Maria exhaled, a shaky breath that felt like it might break her in half. She still backed away, keeping her eyes on the guns until they were holstered. When the last weapon clicked shut, a wave of relief washed over her. She sank to her knees beside Sophia, tears spilling down her cheeks. The store clerk hurried out with a first aid kit, and the older man with glasses helped Maria and Sophia inside the small store. The clerk cleaned Sophia's cut gently, his hands steady now that the danger had passed. Maria pressed more clean cloths to the wound, hugging Sophia protectively. The little girl stared up at her grandmother, wide-eyed and scared. "Grandma," she said softly. Maria cradled Sophia's head against her chest. "I'm here, sweetheart, I'm here." Outside, the officers stood by their cars, talking quietly among themselves. The bystander with the phone lowered it and walked away, shaking his head. Maria could hear the store clerk telling someone on the phone that they needed an ambulance, but there was no more rush. The world had grown calm once more, but the calm felt strange and heavy, like the quiet after a storm. Maria looked at Sophia's tear-streaked face and brushed a strand of hair behind her ear. She thought about how quickly things could go wrong, how a simple trip to the store had turned into a moment of fear she would never forget. She held her granddaughter close, promising herself she would find a way to make sure this never happened again. For now, she would focus on getting Sophia the care she needed and keeping her safe. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, Maria helped Sophia to her feet. The cut was bleeding less now, and Sophia leaned on her grandmother as they stepped back into the quiet street. Maria's legs felt weak, but she knew she had to stay strong for Sophia. She took a deep breath of evening air, tasting the hope that the healing would begin soon. And even though their hearts were still racing, Maria felt a spark of determination. light within her a promise that this day, as scary as it had been, would not be the last word in their story.